Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're totally skipping those boring, dusty grammar definitions you probably remember from grade school. Instead, we're going to look at how we naturally use grammar to tell really captivating stories, build suspense, and even honestly construct the perfect alibi. We're unlocking the storytelling tense. We're going to see exactly how the past continuous tense actually works in our everyday communication.
I was watching you. Okay, think back to that terrifying opening scene in the 1996 horror classic Scream. When the anonymous killer, Ghostface, calls Casey Becker on her landline, he drops this incredibly chilling line. But from a linguistic standpoint, he isn't just being creepy, he's actually using absolutely perfect grammar. By choosing the past continuous tense, the killer establishes this terrifying, ongoing duration of his actions leading right up to that phone call. I mean, he wasn't just there for a second, it was a whole process.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll be defining the storytelling tense, then looking at the grammatical building blocks, 3 specific rules for usage, Hollywood's favorite grammar, and finally, real-life conversation examples. I promise this isn't just some stuffy grammar lesson, it's a real investigation into how we communicate.
So, starting off with Section 1, defining the storytelling tense and going beyond simple completion.
The past continuous tense, which you might also hear called the past progressive tense, is used to describe ongoing actions or conditions happening at a specific time in the past. It highlights the duration or the process of an event. And really, the key takeaway here is that focus on the process of a past event. In storytelling, we see this frequently paired with a simple past tense to show that a longer, ongoing action was suddenly interrupted by a shorter, abrupt one. It literally sets the stage before the action drops.
Moving right along to Section 2, the grammatical building blocks, the code behind the language.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is if we treat grammar not just as arbitrary rules, but as the underlying code of great storytelling, it all starts with selecting the right auxiliary verb, which, by the way, is just the past tense of the verb to be. On the left, we've got the singular rule. We use was for singular subjects, I, he, she, it, or singular nouns. Then over on the right side, there's the plural rule. We use were for plural subjects, you, we, they, or plural nouns. We take this auxiliary verb and simply pair it with the present participle, which is really just your main verb plus an ing tacked onto the end. Let's just walk through the math of this beautifully formatted grammar. For a positive sentence, it's subject plus auxiliary plus verb-ing, like he was cooking dinner or they were playing soccer. Now for a negative sentence, the formula shifts just slightly. You literally just make that auxiliary negative. I wasn't sleeping when you called, or we weren't paying attention. And to make it interrogative, to ask a question, we just flip the subject and the auxiliary verb. Was she driving home alone, or were they working late? It's just a simple, elegant code.
All right, Section 3, 3 rules for usage. This is where duration really matters.
So we're shifting our focus to practical application here. Think of these not as strict rules, but as scenarios where duration is the absolute most important detail. Rule A is for interrupted actions in the past. Rule B is for parallel actions. And Rule C is when a specific time acts as an interruption. We naturally reach for this tense whenever we're setting a scene or describing dramatic interruptions. Let's look at them one by one.
Okay, here's Rule A, interrupted actions. This happens when an ongoing action in the past gets cut short by another action. For example, I was watching TV when the power went out. Or while she was walking to work, it started to rain. There's a totally crucial detail to notice here. Look at how we use the word while right before the past continuous clause, while she was walking. And then we use when before the simple past clause, when the power went out. Honestly, that is the secret sauce for pairing these tenses perfectly.
And this brilliantly illustrates Rule B, which covers parallel actions. Sometimes 2 or more continuous actions are happening simultaneously in the past, like while I was studying, my roommate was playing video games. It just paints this complete rich picture of the environment. Literally no one is interrupting anyone, it's just 2 processes happening side by side. Finally, Rule C brings us to using a specific time as an interruption. Check out this timeline. Say you started driving at 10 p.m. and arrived at 2 a.m. How do you describe what was happening exactly at midnight? Well, you'd say, at midnight last night, we were still driving through the mountains. The specific time, midnight in this case, acts as an anchor. It intersects with the ongoing action that was already in progress.
Section 4, Hollywood's favorite grammar. Let's move to and see how this builds into alibis, flashbacks, and chaotic events in film.
Film screenwriters rely incredibly heavily on this exact structure to communicate chaos or to effectively set up flashbacks. Take this iconic narration from the 1994 film Forrest Gump. Forrest is setting the background for a flashback to his experiences in the Vietnam War, and he says, "One day it started raining, and it didn't stop for 4 months. We were walking in the rain, we were sleeping in the rain, we were eating in the rain." I mean, you can practically feel the sheer exhaustion in that delivery, right?
If we break down the grammar code of that quote, it is a total masterpiece of parallel continuous actions. Forrest uses repeated past continuous verbs. We were walking, we were sleeping, we were eating. By repeating the subject-auxiliary verb structure, it creates this really satisfying rhythmic drumbeat that perfectly mimics the relentless, unbroken duration of the rain over that entire 4-month period. The grammar is literally enhancing the emotional weight of the story.
Now let's jump to a totally different genre with the 2012 movie The Avengers. Picture Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow, right? She's tied to a chair by Russian mobsters. Suddenly, a cell phone held to her ear rings. It's Agent Coulson telling her to come in. She snaps back. "Are you kidding? I was working." "Coulson, I'm in the middle of an interrogation. This idiot was giving me everything."
Let's look at the mechanics of what she just said. This is a classic interrupted action. I was working, and this idiot was giving me everything. Natasha uses the past continuous tense to explicitly point out that Coulson's short, simple past phone call completely interrupted her ongoing, super complex operation, where the mobster was right in the middle of revealing all his secrets. So the grammar here frames Coulson not just as a caller, but as a total interrupter. Moving to Section 5, real-life conversation examples. Let's call this the workplace micro-mystery.
Look, we don't all get interrogated by mobsters, but think about the last time you had to explain why you missed a boss's phone call. That's a pretty high-stakes scenario in its own right, isn't it? Imagine Karen, the manager playing detective here. She says, "I tried calling you 3 times yesterday between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. What were you doing?" Boom, there is our interrogative form meeting reality. Mark, the employee, replies, "I'm so sorry. I was driving back from the regional client meeting at 5 p.m., so I couldn't pick up." Mark uses the positive continuous form to establish exactly what was happening at that specific time to explain his missed call.
So, the crucial point is how Mark handles the follow-up. Karen asks, "But I called again at 5:45 p.m. Were you still driving then?" Mark replies, "No. By 5:45 p.m., I wasn't driving anymore. I was checking into my hotel and my phone was on silent." This is genius. Mark brilliantly uses the negative form, "wasn't driving," to shut down that assumption completely. And then he immediately pivots to a new positive continuous action, "was checking into my hotel," to establish an airtight alibi for that newly specified interrupted time. To finish out our little micro-mystery, Karen says, "While you were traveling, the client emailed us to approve the budget." Mark says, "That's great news. I was worrying about that approval all afternoon." Notice the parallel continuous actions happening out of sight from one another here? While Mark was traveling and continually worrying, the client was emailing. They just dovetail perfectly. The past continuous isn't just about time. It's about framing the narrative, defining the duration, and bringing past environments back to life. I want to sincerely thank you for learning with me today. And I'm going to leave you with this one provocative question to practice right now in your own head. So what were you doing right before you started watching this explainer?